So, the date was March 1st, 2023. I was working on a Vengeance Virus plushie, and then Instagram presented me with this. Jennifer Coolidge as a Toku villain. And I instantly knew what I had to do. The Vengeance Virus plushie was shelved, and it was time to make that dress, but, on a doll, obviously. I used this doll simply because I felt out of the few I own, it had the most in common of how Jennifer Coolidge looks in real life. None of them look like Jennifer Coolidge in the photo shoot, I'm afraid. And I started off by trying to develop a sewing pattern. I tried emulating the kimono look she had going on in the dress in the photo shoot. I tried darts. I tried simplifying that to a curved seam. I tried making the sleeves and the torso all one piece. I even recycled the pleating idea from my second Witch Bandora dress for Lightning Collection Rita Repulsa. And for the skirt section of the dress, I was going to go with a quarter circle skirt. And the whole thing looked terrible. So I decided to go on the internet and find a sewing pattern. Bratz dolls were made with clothing in mind, and they're popular. Somebody's done it. And after 2 seconds, I found this tunic on Pinterest by Shellywood. I picked this sewing pattern because I felt its silhouette matched the bow dress Jennifer Coolidge wore close enough. So working from this sewing pattern, I made a new mock-up. I decided not to sew up the back, but instead have a pleat, for a couple of reasons. It wouldn't hinder the doll's leg movement, there's somewhere for press studs to be attached, and that pleat gives the back bow a bit more of a foundation. And you know what's funny? What I did when I was trying to make my own sewing pattern, that took me a good 2 days. The mock-up I came up with when I was recycling somebody else's sewing pattern, that took me 1 evening. Clearly, I have learned nothing from that Ishizu Ishtar project. Also, I would just like to point out that for making my own sewing pattern and modifying the Shelley Wood sewing pattern, I had a supervisor. So that's how you know the Shelley Wood sewing pattern is correct, because Missy is never wrong. Also, I'm just going to go on a detour here. Can you imagine how great it would be if Jennifer Coolidge did the Rita Repulsa 10,000 years bit? Oh, after 10,000 years, I'm free. I'm taking the earth, dumbass! Jenny, if you're watching, I'm sorry. So I transferred my sewing pattern over to some black fabric. I put some zigzag stitching around the neckline to stop it from fraying. But to stop fraying for the rest of the outfit, I used a combination of hemming and pinking shears. The base of the outfit was made. I started neatening up the sewing pattern for the bows. But that's when I realized something had slipped my mind. The gloves. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't find any pictures of the gloves from all angles, so I just had to go by what pictures were available to me. From what I can tell, the index finger and the middle finger are black on top and white on the bottom, but for the ring finger and pinky finger, they're white on top and black on the bottom. And due to the scale I was working on, I converted them into mittens. I salvaged the white parts from one of my failed attempts to make that first Witch Bandora dress for Lightning Collection Rita Repulsa, and I was very careful to remember to swap the colors around based on which hand I was making the mitten for. I attached the left mitten, and that's when I noticed something. In the photo shoot, there is a ring on the left hand, so I went out and bought some beads, just so I could have one bead. That was more annoying than having to get the needle through the sleeve. But the mittens were attached, there was something to represent the ring on the left hand, and now I could work on the bows. It was at this point I realized that the dress didn't have a kimono-style opening. What I thought was the opening was actually string holding the large front bow in place. The bows were of varying levels of difficulty. The bows in their own right were actually quite easy. 2 sheets of fabric, stitched together, cut off the excess fabric with pinking shears, reverse them with a chopstick. Done. Although trying to get them to be the right way around was hard because that opening so I could actually reverse the bow was in the middle and not at the side. The reason I made that decision is simply because the middle of the bow was going to be pleated and it was going to have additional stitching going through it. So if I can put less bulk on that area of the bow, I will. The front bow has some tails. I'm not sure about the back, we can't see that. At first I tried making this V shape, but that was too small and I couldn't reverse it, so I just made a single strip and stitched that to the bow. Now to attach the bows to the dress. The strip of fabric I made to cover up the pleating on the back bow, I made it too long, and as a result, there was a lot of layers of fabric for the needle to go through, and it ended up being very frumpy, and to be honest, the stitching wasn't all that tight. Like, look at this, it's very loose. I then removed the back bow, I made a new pleating cover for it with the invisible ladder stitch. I attached one end of the cover, stitched along the back, adding the bow as I went, and the back bow was done. And the stitching this time around was much more tightly pulled. I repeated this method for the front bow, and the dress was done. Well, I made that harder than it needed to be, didn't I? So, the two negatives I have with this outfit are the following. I didn't realize until it was too late that a percentage of the thread I used to stitch up the tunic section of the outfit wasn't black. It was just a very dark shade of green. So that was fun to notice. And the thing that I dislike even more than the green thread accident are the mittens. Or rather, the right mitten. When I was attaching it to the sleeve, I think I pulled the thread too tightly because it is a bit of a struggle now to get the hand through the wrist section of the sleeve, and I do have to use a chopstick to sort of hold it open to guarantee the thumb can get through. And just in general, so this applies to the left mitten as well, I should have done one of two things. Attach the mitten to the rest of the sleeve, then sew everything up, or have the sleeve be a bit longer and applique on the white sections. But yeah, that's really the only things I dislike about this. Despite all the back and forth, oh, I am so happy with those bows. I really like them. I mean, it is a shame that the tail on the front is a little bit asymmetrical, but come on, that's a nitpick. This is great, and quite frankly, I own a Jennifer Coolidge doll. That's pretty cool. And hey, maybe this time I'll actually learn something. And just before I go, I want to tell you a little story. The making of the bows hurt me. Yeah, when trying to reverse the fabric, I got a splinter from the chopstick. And when I was stitching up the box pleating in the bows themselves, the needle in my sewing machine broke. You see that little pointy bit where the eye of the needle can be found? That almost hit me in my actual eyeball. So yeah, a like, a comment, a subscription, or at the very least sharing this video with other people would be greatly appreciated. Now if you will excuse me, I want a hot dog real bad.